Hello everyone. Today I will tell scary stories about roads near the forest, after which you will not fall asleep. First story. On the night when the moon was hidden behind thick clouds and darkness enveloped the land, the townspeople tried in vain to convince each other not to travel the Blood Shadow Road. It stretched along a deep forest, which was considered cursed and impregnable. It was said that the Blood Shadow Road got its grim name after a terrible tragedy that happened decades ago. A group of travelers went to this forest, seeking to find a lost city, which was legendary. None of them returned. Severed limbs, bloody footprints, and tattered clothes were found along the Blood Shadow Road. Since then, many have dared to embark on this path, eager to prove their courage, but they all disappeared without a trace. Gossip said that at nightfall, the shadows of the dead begin to wander along the road. Their gloomy glances pierce the souls of those who dare to set foot on this path. One day, a young couple, Gregory and Allison, seemed ready to face the horrors of the Blood Shadow Road at last. They flew to the city and went on a night journey. Their hearts raced with excitement as they walked along the dusty road surrounded by gloomy trees. But as the night deepened, their confidence began to dwindle. There was a rustling of the wind, as if it were whispering something menacing to them. The shadows began to seem alive. They moved and distorted, creating the illusion of a living nightmare. Soon Gregory and Allison began to hear whispers, but the words were incomprehensible. It was only a restless rustle, it would seem. They quickened their pace, but the road seemed to stretch out into infinity. Before them loomed the shadow of a figure. Hearts sank, but with every step, the shadow got closer. When they finally decided to turn around, a row of grim figures in tattered robes stood before them. They could not see the faces of these shadows, but they felt their hatred and thirst for revenge. Gregory and Allison tried to run, but the road seemed to move them ominously in different directions. The shadows approached, their cold hands touching the skin, causing a terrible sensation. Through fear and hopelessness, Gregory and Allison realized that they had become part of the very horror story that turned Blood Shadow Road into a living nightmare. Their cries died away in the night, and only the wind continued to whisper the terrible secrets of this accursed road. By dawn, only traces of the disappeared remained on the Blood Shadow Road. Local residents continued to exhort each other about how dangerous it is to step on this path. What horrors can await there for everyone who dares to step into the darkness? Years have passed and Blood Shadow Road has become something of a legend. However, every generation has passed on this macabre tale to each other, a reminder that some horrors are best left alone. But there was one girl, named Lena, who always felt drawn to the mystical attraction of dark stories. She grew up listening to tales of the Blood Shadow Road, and her heart burned with a desire to know what exactly lies behind this legend. Once Lena reached maturity, she decided it was time to face this nightmare. She studied old maps and records, immersed herself in the history of this road. It seemed to her that if she found the truth, she could unravel the mystery of this place and appease her passion for thrills. In the very darkness of the night, when the moon again disappeared behind the clouds, Lena went to the road of the Bloody Shadow. She walked, feeling the night wind whisper in her ear as if warning her, but she was determined. As the night wore on, the road seemed more and more ominous. Shadows began to slither past her like ghosts of departed souls. Lena couldn't help shivering, but she kept walking. The whispers grew louder and, as if in answer, there were faint rustlings from the darkness. When Lena finally stopped, a figure flashed before her. In the darkness, she saw eyes that blazed like red embers. It was a shadow, alive, thirsty. Lena flinched, but didn't back down. She asked the shadow a question, asked what happened on this road decades ago. The shadow slowly began to tell a story. The story of a group of travelers who had actually tried to pass this road and had been consumed by the sinister forces of the forest. The shadow spoke of how their souls had become part of that darkness, how they wandered forever in search of revenge. Lena listened, clenching her fists with tension. and then she felt the shadow begin to approach as her icy fingers touched her skin. Lena felt an ominous force trying to drag her into its darkness. With a last effort, Lena screamed and threw the shadow away from her. She ran down the road, darkness distorting her path, but she didn't stop. Finally, she ran out of the forest, breathing heavily and trembling with fear. Now Lena knew the truth, but she also realized that not every secret needed to be revealed. The Blood Shadow Road remained a mysterious nightmare, and Lena never dared to approach its borders again. She knew now that some horrors were best left alone, buried in the shadows of the past. Second story. In a quiet town surrounded by dense forest, there was a road that always caused awe in its inhabitants. Black Wind Road, they called it. It stretched between dense trees and led to an old abandoned estate steeped in dark legends. The legend was about a girl in a white dress, a ghost that roams the Black Wind Road every night. It was said that she was the daughter of a baron who lived in an abandoned estate. Her name was Eliza, and she was imprisoned in terrible loneliness, deprived of freedom and happiness all her life. The baron promised to marry her to a wealthy nobleman, but Eliza fell in love with a poor artist who taught her to see beauty in the world around her. When the baron found out about their forbidden love, he locked Eliza in a room on the top floor and forbade her to see her lover. Despair and bitterness fettered her soul, and she began to slowly lose her mind. Her screams and cries resounded throughout the estate, but no one could help. One day, on the night of a terrible storm, Eliza disappeared. Nobody knew what happened to her. Some said that she had run away. Others believed that her baron had killed her to get rid of the shame. But since then, every night, when the moon was hidden behind the clouds, an eerie figure in a white dress appeared on the Black Wind Road. Those who dared to walk this road at night claimed to have seen the ghost of Eliza. She walked forward as if in search of something, and her eyes were full of sadness and suffering. When she looked up, the fleeting ones glowed in the dark, and the cold wind around her began to howl. The people of the town were afraid of Black Wind Road and Eliza. They said that the ghost haunts those who dare to enter this road, and those who saw her eyes were doomed to restless dreams and terrible visions. One day, a young guy named David decided to check how true these legends are. He never believed in ghosts and chose to walk the Black Wind Road on a night when the moon was full. When David stepped onto the road, it was quiet and cold around him. The wind began to howl, and he felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. In the distance, he saw a ghostly glow, and there, in the middle of the road, stood a girl in a white dress. Her eyes were full of sadness and pity, and she slowly approached David. His heart was beating faster, but he stood as if petrified. The girl raised her hand and touched his face. Her touch was cold as ice, and in that moment, he saw her tragic story. He saw Eliza, imprisoned in a dark room, recognized her fear and loneliness. He saw the baron who was responsible for her suffering. He saw her last moments as she disappeared into the darkness. David was on his knees, his eyes full of tears. Eliza was gone, but her presence remained around him. Since then, he has never been able to forget what he saw, and began to believe that some stories can live forever, intertwined with reality and nightmares. David left Black Wind Road with mixed feelings of anxiety and understanding. He no longer doubted the existence of ghosts and realized that legends might contain grains of truth. The evening spent next to Eliza remained forever in his memory. He told his story to the people of the town, but many continued to think he was crazy. However, some who also dared to walk the Black Wind Road began to see the ghost of Eliza. It has become a kind of symbol of the mysterious past, fears, and hopes. David, despite his new beliefs, decided not to return to Black Wind Road again. In his heart now lived the fear of her, and in his mind the image of Eliza. He began to feel her presence even in his dreams. Over time, David learned that Eliza's story was much more complicated than he could have imagined. He found out that her death was due to the desire for revenge, the power of darkness that captured her soul. Eliza became not just a ghost, but a kind of protector of those who dared to walk the Black Wind Road. She turned her gaze to those who were ready to hear her story, and let go of those who were able to right the wrongs of the past. Years have passed, the town has changed, but the legend of Black Wind Road and Elise lives on. It has become a reminder that the past can have power over the present if we forget the lessons it can teach. Those who were willing to listen to Eliza's story found in her not only fear, but also a source of hope that even in the darkest corners of the world, there is room for redemption and salvation. Third story. In the shadow of a dense forest, a narrow road stretched, tangled, and forgotten by time. People avoided it, feeling that the place was not normal. The atmosphere around was dense and unhealthy. Legends told of a terrible creature that pursued those who dared to get too close to this road. The old-timers called him Shadow Whisperer, and his story began with an unknown event of ancient times. It was said that once a group of explorers came to this place in search of something unusual. However, after their return, something in them changed. They began to look tormented, like abandoned souls. It was rumored to be the Shadow Whisperer, a being that looked like a human, but drenched in black shadow, with a face that seemed to be devoid of any features. His existence was shrouded in mystical magic, and his true intention remained a mystery. There were very few who dared approach this road after sunset. However, among them was a young guide named Nikolai. He did not believe in legends and believed that all these were just fairy tales for children. One day, on a night when the moon was hidden by clouds, Nikolai went to the road near the forest. He was confident that he could dispel the legends and prove that the Shadow Whisperer was nothing but nothing. As he approached the road, it became very cold around him, and the wind began to twist the waves of the curving eternal night. He felt something in the depths of the forest watching him. But Nikolai brushed off this feeling and moved on. The deeper he went, the colder it got. And suddenly, he saw him, the Shadow Whisperer. Darkness enveloped his being, and his eyes blazed like two terrible red lights. The body was stretched and distorted, as if the darkness itself had taken on the shape. Nicholas felt his heart begin to pound with fear. Darkness emanated from this creature, as if absorbing the surrounding space. A voice like a whisper from the darkness began to penetrate Nikolai's mind. "You, Kulnin, avoid me," whispered the Shadow Whisperer, his voice sounding like hundreds of whispers merged into one. Nikolai felt strength leaving his legs, and he fell to his knees in front of the entity. He tried to shout, but the words were drowned in darkness. Horrified, he realized that despite his disbelief, he was inside a nightmare he couldn't handle. Darkness began to envelop him like a ball of shadows. Nikolai's consciousness clouded over, and he felt his soul freeze under the weight of this terrible entity. The morning came, but Nikolai was not there. Only his footprints led deeper into the forest, but he himself disappeared, as if he had been swallowed up by darkness. And so, the legend of the Shadow Whisperer only intensified. The inhabitants of the city no longer dared to approach the road near the forest, forgetting their bold convictions. The darkness that lurked in the shadows continued to devour those who dared to enter its domain. Rumors about the Shadow Whisperer and his journey began to spread among the teenagers of the town. Their warm hearts and thirst for adventure overcame their fear, and they decided they wanted to test the veracity of these stories. This group included Jason, Victoria, Emily, Chris, and Liam. They had been friends since childhood, and neither of them wanted to be left out of this daring expedition. Gathering at night in their secret hideout in the woods, they discussed their plans. "I think we should see for ourselves. Some Shadow Whisperer is just a legend," Jason said, trying to sound confident. "What if it's not just a legend? We might stumble across something dangerous," Victoria protested, looking around as if looking for secret signs. "I agree with Victoria. Maybe it's too dangerous," Emily agreed, looking back at the deep forest. However, Chris and Liam were convinced of their decision. We're not little children. Let's see what's really there. If there's nothing, then what will we lose? Chris said. Liam added, Actually, we're curious, aren't we? I want to know what's really going on. The debate continued, but in the end, curiosity and the desire to solve the mystery took over. The teenagers decided to go to the Black Wind Road. That evening, when the moon rose in the sky, they moved towards the gloomy road. The wind was cool, and the trees seemed to whisper warnings to them. The heavier the atmosphere became, they began to feel as if someone was watching them, some kind of invisible presence. But they steadfastly moved on. Fourth story. In the shadow of a dense forest, where darkness streamed from under ancient trees, a road stretched, overgrown with legends of gloomy events. Local residents told each other about a strange man who appeared on this road, as if from nowhere, and in his presence bad fates overtook. Legends said that this man was faceless and had black eyes in which one could see the reflection of his own nightmares. His appearance led to misfortune and hardship, and those who dared to cross his path found themselves entangled in a chain of inexplicable events. One day, a group of young people from a nearby town, having heard the legends about a strange man, decided to check the veracity of these stories. Among them were Anna, Mark, Olia, Dennis, and Katja. They decided to go to the road near the forest on the night when the moon slowly rose in the sky. Shining flashlights, they moved along the dark road. The atmosphere became more and more tense. However, their resolve grew steadily, and they tried to drive away the fear. As they approached the center of the forest, the surroundings began to thicken, and the air became cold and unpleasant. And suddenly, they saw him, a strange man. He stood in the middle of the road, in the black shadow, their flashlights illuminating his faceless face and empty eyes. The man raised his hand, and their hearts clenched in horror. But instead of falling on them troubles, a piece of paper appeared in his hand. He stepped closer, and the look in his eyes excited the group palpably. "Read this," he said, his voice sounding distorted and cold. Olia took a piece of paper and began to read. The words described the dreams and fears of each of them, revealed secret desires and obsessions. The group listened dumbfounded, and their fears seemed to become more and more real. "I can see your fear," the man continued. "I can help you get rid of it." Mixed feelings gripped the young people. On the one hand, they wanted to get rid of their fears, but on the other hand, they realized that this man carries some incomprehensible power within himself. Under the slow starry night, they decided to trust this strange man. He began questioning them, asking personal questions, revealing their deepest fears and desires. With every word, they felt how he opens their souls, and as if fears began to push out. As the night dragged on, they began to realize that the man was really changing their view of the world. Their fears began to disappear, as if dissolving into the darkness of the night. But they also knew that despite his help, this meeting would leave a mark on them forever. When they finally looked at the man, they realized that he now looked less strange, his black. New eyes perceived the surrounding world with new clarity. "Thank you," Mark said, his voice sounding grateful. The man smiled, and his face took shape. "Remember," he said, "fear is not just an evil, but a force that can change you." With these words, he disappeared, as if dissolved in the darkness of the night. The group stood on the road, sensing that they were no longer what they used to be. Their fears vanished, but their hearts remained stirred, their souls open to new paths. They returned to the city, but the legends about the strange man and his journey continued to live on. But now, when people heard about them, they thought that fears are not always what they seem, and that some incomprehensible traveler can carry not only horror, but also the possibility of liberation. And although the black-eyed, faceless man no longer appeared on the road, his influence remained. He became a symbol of the fact that fears can be overcome if you find the strength to face them and go through them.